Good day, everyone. Pope Francis called on the Church in October 2021 to reflect on the theme of synodality. This topic is titled Synod and Synodality, Communion, Participation and Mission. This was actually the title the Pope gave. Today, we are here to discuss the theme with a special focus on the Bible. Usually, processes are formulated to help in the execution of a plan. But many people believe that the uniqueness of the Pope's call is that this is a process on a process. While this may be true, it is also valid to look at this call as a reflection on the being of the Church, following the words of St. John Chrysostom, who said that the Church is synonymous with synodality. If you remove this way of being in the Church, then the Church runs into an identity crisis. The Pope has already produced a theme for this synod, and the preparatory document for this synod has an elaborate scriptural reflection based on the themes proposed. For these reasons, my reflection on the synod in the Bible will not move too far away from the very texts proposed by the preparatory documents of this synod. Thus, I will look at synodality in the scriptures by looking at the proposals of the preparatory documents of this synod and the text which it proposes for our reflection. But before I do this, I shall look briefly at the theme and the appearance of some key terminologies of that theme in the scripture. The sub-themes of this invitation by the Pope is communion, participation, and mission. However, the principal term in these three concepts is the term communion, which defines the Church in mission, where each and every one of us participates for the proclamation of God's kingdom. The concept of communion is quite central to our reflection here. So I reflect on this concept of communion with reference to the scriptures. The Greek word koinonia, translated sometimes as communion, occurs 19 times in 17 verses of the New Testament. The New Revised Standard Version translates 8 of these cases as fellowship, 10 of these cases as sharing, and once as communion in 2 Corinthians 13:13. But there can be no doubt they all exist within the same semantic field, that is the same field of meaning. Sharing has to do with fellowship, and fellowship has to do also with communion. However, while we focus on the word communion, we should also pay attention to other nouns which are connected to the word communion in the New Testament. A few of these are, for example, koinos, koine, which can mean common, public, together. We find the former much more clearly in the New Testament. This is still connected to the idea we find in koinonia. However, there is something striking about these other words connected to communion. They are mostly negative. These words mean common, public, and can also mean profane, defiled, unclean. And it is not difficult to see why. Consecrated things are usually things set apart from the rest. And if we have something in common, it is not set apart, then it is an easy step to start considering them ordinary or even profane. In fact, the feminine form of this word, koine, in classical Greek, could actually mean prostitute. So this is why we must continually make efforts to build up that which we have in common when we talk about communion, in order to continue to appreciate the beauty of that which we share in common. If we do not care to share and appreciate our commonality, then soon we begin to consider everything we have in common profane, ordinary, or even useless. This is the reason why this call by the Pope is supremely essential. The preparatory document of this synod and the scripture actually calls on us for a profound reflection on these ideas. The preparatory document proposes two images that inspire the reflection on synodality based on the scriptures. One emerges from the community scene that accompanies evangelization, and the other refers to the experience of the Spirit, in which Peter recognized the dangers of placing limits on faith sharing based on differences of culture. We shall focus our attention on the first image, the community scene represented by what the document describes as actors. Three actors were used by this preparatory document to deal with these images. The first, Jesus; the second, the crowds; and the third, the apostles. Something significant about the way the preparatory document organizes its thought is that after Jesus as an actor, it treats the crowd before the apostles. This does not mean that the apostles lose their importance, but rather because every human person represented by the actor crowd is a subject of mission, and the salvific message and the apostles are also a part of it. So let's consider Jesus as an actor. The first actor, Jesus, according to the preparatory document, is the absolute protagonist who takes the initiative by sowing the words and the signs of the kingdom in the lives of those who are separated from God and abandoned by the community. Jesus had a modus operandi according to the New Testament. From the apostles Jesus invited to be his most intimate followers, we find simple, ordinary fishermen. However, we also find some with the description tax collector, for example in Matthew 10:3, and the zealot in Luke 6:25. These are not the most flattering of titles to have even in the days of Jesus. One was a public sinner, and the other could possibly have been a member of a violent group that pushed for a military liberation of the Jews in the hands of the Romans. Some may want to use the word terrorist to describe the activity of a zealot in the days of Jesus. So if we consider this group, if we consider the activities of this group that is linked to extremism, then we find out how the diversity in the composition of the community of Jesus. Therefore, the choice we have to collaborate in the mission, we find already that there is no partiality or prejudice in the choice that Jesus Christ made in gathering his disciples. We can also see that in the miracle narratives, among those who received the greatest praises for their faith were foreigners. The Syrophoenician woman of Mark 7:24-30 was praised by Jesus precisely for the way she insisted for the favor through faith. The Roman centurion of Matthew 8:5-13 also received praise from Jesus because of his faith. Yet, these are people who are considered to be at the margins of the Jewish religious heritage and culture. Jesus' entire philosophy of mission was the integration of diversity in his missionary plan, where differences, instead of constituting obstacles, become avenues of reaching out to all peoples. Now we consider the second actor, the crowd. The second actor, according to the preparatory document, is the crowd. And the crowd is almost a figurative word that speaks of inclusiveness in the people that Jesus Christ missioned to. The revelation of Jesus was not just limited to the enlightened or the educated people. The inclusive nature of Jesus' audience is apparent from what has already been said in the foregoing when we were talking about Jesus as an actor. The Canaanite woman who was favored by Jesus in Matthew chapter 15 was cited as an example of the inclusive nature of the audience of Jesus, and therefore subjects of his revelation. However, we also know that among those who were forgiven by Jesus were fellow Hebrews, like Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19, or the adulterous woman of John chapter 8. If everyone is a subject of God's revelation, then everyone who belongs to the church should become a part of discussion on how the mission is to be carried out. Now, the third actor is the apostles. According to the preparatory document to this reflection on the apostle, it states that the election of the apostles is not the privilege of an exclusive position of power and separation, but the grace of an inclusive ministry of blessing and fellowship. The apostles' entrance into the scene of the gospel coincides with the call Jesus gave them. And they were not introduced by miracles or as subjects of Jesus' teaching or preaching. The apostles were called by Jesus, and they are to facilitate an encounter with Jesus instead of encumbering it. Now, what is the importance of considering these actors and for them to work together in the mission that Jesus preached? Jesus, the crowd, and the apostles must be continuously contemplated explored in depth so that the church may become what she is intended to be in the world. These three figures or actors are emblematic for the reflection we need to make on how to move together in a process we all feel we not only belong to, but also contribute to our common goal and our destiny as a people of God. According to this preparatory document, without Jesus, someone else will take his place and the church becomes a contract between the apostles and the crowd, with a dialogue which will end up following the plot of a political game. Without the apostles, the link to the evangelical truth is broken, and the crowd ends up believing a myth or an ideology about Jesus. Without the crowd, the apostles' relationship with Jesus becomes a sectarian and self-centered form of religion. The leaders of the church must lead the people to Jesus, and the people, represented by the biblical and metaphoric crowd, must learn to understand the place of the leaders of the church in their journey towards God. For this to happen, there must be an open dialogue between the leaders of the church, represented by the apostles, and the people represented by the crowd. In this way, the church can truly work together and construct what is truly synodal in its approach to the missions and evangelization. So thank you very much, brothers. As we have reflected on this, let us think of how we all contribute into building a church that is going to remain one, work together as one, and work together to a common goal towards our own salvation. Thank you very much, and may God bless you all.